Russia is testing kinetic anti-satellite weapons, ASATs, and China is also expanding its military space capabilities. U.S. Space Force Chief General Raymond says the U.S. must mitigate that threat. Retired Air Force General Kevin Chilton was commander of U.S. Strategic Command, and he's a former NASA astronaut. He's currently at the Mitchell Institute. General Chilton, welcome to the program.
Good morning, Mimi. Good to join you.
You know, there have been some high-profile missile tests by Russia and China recently. Let's start with that anti-satellite test by Russia. What does that capability tell us?
I think it tells us a couple things. One, that they've demonstrated a capability we suspected they had for a long time. And two, that they're not a responsible actor when it comes to their behavior in space. I think the third thing is that we want to make sure they never do this again, and certainly do not feel the capability to hold our satellites at risk with this type of device in the future.
So what would the U.S. need to do to defend, to effectively deter against those ASAT weapons?
Well, I think there's several things. We have very vulnerable constellations up at this time. And so as we look to the future, and this would not be an immediate fix, but an important one, we need to consider how we make our satellite constellations more resilient, more defensible. And so re-architecting the satellite constellations that provide us the services that we've come to depend on, both in our daily lives as American citizens, GPS, and the timing signal that we get from that, that's so important to just about every facet of our lives, to the military aspects of missile warning and precision navigation that GPS provides, and over the horizon communications that's so critical for the way we defend our country and the way our forces need these capabilities. We need to think about new ways, new architects. So that work is started and needs to continue. But beyond that, I think we also need to develop capabilities that the Russians will look at that makes clear to them that if they come after our systems, we will be more resilient, but we will also come after their systems and remove them from the battlefield as well. The worst case scenario, Mimi, would be if they were able to take away our satellite systems that we depend on, and we were not able to do the same to them. That would be put our forces in a severe disadvantage. So to deter them, we need both a more resilient constellation, but we need offensive capability as well.
And they would go after our satellites, General, just to kind of even the playing field, if you will, because of the power of our sensors and things like that. Is that correct?
Actually, they would go after them to uneven the playing field, to tilt them in their advantage, because they have the very same systems on orbit. So as I said, the worst case would be is if we had no GPS, we had no surveillance from space, we had no over-the-horizon comms, and we had no missile warning because they destroyed those satellites, but they retained that capability. That would be a terribly unfair situation for our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and guardians to go into, and Marines.
You know, there's also the issue of space debris. You were an astronaut. Did you see space debris? I mean, were you ever affected by it?
I flew 3 shuttle missions. On each one, when we returned to Earth, we had to have windows replaced, which would suggest that we were impacted in more than just the windows, since that was a small surface area. Fortunately, these were very small pieces of debris, some natural and some man-made. But absolutely, it's a threat. And the types of debris that hit the shuttles that I flew on were not big enough to be detected by our ground sensors. So when you hear the reports of the thousands of pieces of debris created by the latest Russian anti-satellite tests, that's a small portion of the total amount of debris created.
So what kind of cost could the U.S. impose on bad behavior in space?
Well, there's always the diplomatic approach and to gather a community of concerned countries to put pressure on countries that do irresponsible things such as this ASAT test. But again, I also go back from the military perspective. It's not just diplomacy. We also need to be able to deter this activity. Nations have proven over the years that sometimes the diplomatic pressures put on them do not deter them from what they actually want to accomplish. And we can see that over and over again in history. So it needs to be a combination. There's no one answer here. But, you know, a diplomatic approach, an information approach to educate the world about the seriousness of this and the wrong-headedness of this activity. But then there also has to be a military option as well, and economic pressure is certainly one that can be brought to bear.
General, I want to ask you about China because there's speculation that China has been testing nuclear first strike weapons. Are American missile defenses currently adequate?
Well, we have to begin with the reality that we didn't field a missile defense system for the United States of America to be used against either China or Russia. The capability of that system and the number of weapons we've deployed and the ground-based deterrent up in Alaska and California is only meant to defend against North Korea. And so the notion that we have a missile defense system in place to defend the United States of America is just flat wrong against China and Russia. We've never fielded that. And that's been a policy decision.
So what do we currently know about how advanced China's space capabilities are right now and what their intentions might be?
Well, we know a lot because of, not only because of our own ability in the Department of Defense to collect on their activity, but commercial satellites now have pulled back the veil in China that normally, information that normally may not find its way to the press. But we see them building intercontinental ballistic missile silos in vast numbers. So offensive capability, they're building a nuclear triad. So they're changing their nuclear posture. It's not clear exactly why. I suspect it's to put themselves in a position to coerce the United States to bend to their will. And on the space side, we know for sure that they're fielding a tremendous amount of equipment, both jammers as well as direct ascent kinetic anti-satellite weapons, just like the Russians recently demonstrated. In fact, the Chinese demonstrated back in 2007. And unlike testing them, they're fielding them. And so we know they have the same intent, and that is to go after our satellite systems to uneven or tip the battlefield in their favor by retaining their own.
All right. Well, General, thank you so much for being on the program. Nice to talk to you. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on any future Government Matters interviews.